In the sleepy English village of Evermoor, nestled between rolling hills and ancient woods, there was an oak tree that had stood for centuries. Its massive trunk bore the scars of time, and its gnarled branches seemed to cradle the sky. The villagers called it the Lover's Oak, claiming it had witnessed countless clandestine meetings and whispered promises. But for Sophie Bennett and Thomas Ainsworth, the oak was more than a symbol of love. It was the only place they could be together. Sophie was the daughter of Evermoor's most respected physician, a man who valued propriety and status above all else. Thomas, on the other hand, was a farmhand, working tirelessly to support his widowed mother and younger siblings. Their worlds could not have been more different, but their hearts had found a way to bridge the divide. It had begun one spring afternoon when Sophie wandered into the woods with her sketchbook. She had been searching for inspiration when she stumbled upon Thomas mending a broken fence. His hands were calloused, his shirt stained with dirt, but his smile was warm and genuine. "You're trespassing," he said, his tone teasing. Sophie raised an eyebrow. "I didn't see a sign." "Well, if you promise not to tell anyone about the state of this fence, I suppose I can let it slide," he replied, wiping his hands on his trousers. They laughed, and from that moment, their paths began to intertwine. Sophie returned to the woods often, her sketchbook filling with images of the Lover's Oak and, increasingly, of Thomas. Their secret meetings became the highlight of Sophie's days. Under the oak's sprawling canopy, they shared their dreams and fears. Sophie spoke of her desire to study art in London, while Thomas revealed his ambition to one day own a farm of his own. "You're not like anyone I've ever met," Thomas said one evening, his voice soft. "You make me feel like anything is possible." Sophie's heart swelled, but she knew their love was fragile. Her father would never approve of Thomas, and the village's gossiping tongues would tear them apart if their relationship were discovered. The summer brought a cruel twist of fate. Sophie's father arranged for her to marry Charles Hawthorne, a wealthy landowner whose family had long-standing ties to the Bennets. The announcement was made during a grand dinner party, and Sophie felt her world crumble as the guests applauded. That night, she ran to the Lover's Oak, tears streaming down her face. Thomas was already there, his expression dark with worry. "My father, he's promised me to someone else," she choked out. Thomas pulled her into his arms, his embrace a sanctuary. "We'll find a way," he said fiercely. "We'll leave Evermoor. Start fresh somewhere far away." Sophie wanted to believe him, but the weight of her obligations bore down on her. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparations for Sophie's engagement. She and Thomas continued to meet in secret, their moments together tinged with desperation. They hatched a plan to leave Evermoor, but the risk was immense. If they were caught, Thomas could lose everything. On the eve of her engagement party, Sophie slipped away to the Lover's Oak. Thomas was waiting, his horse saddled and ready. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his silver-gray eyes searching hers. "I can't stay here," Sophie said. "Not without you." Their escape began under a moonlit sky, the oak's shadow stretching long across the ground as if bidding them farewell. They rode through the night, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration. But their freedom was short-lived. By dawn, Sophie's father and a group of villagers caught up to them. The confrontation was fierce, with accusations and threats flying. Her father demanded she return, declaring Thomas unworthy of her. "I love him," Sophie cried. "Is that not enough?" "It's not about love," her father snapped. "It's about duty." The villagers dragged Thomas away, leaving Sophie sobbing in the dirt. Her father forbade her from leaving the house, and for weeks, she was a prisoner in her own home. News reached her that Thomas had left Evermoor, but no one knew where he had gone. Heartbroken, Sophie turned to her art, pouring her anguish into her sketches. The Lover's Oak became a recurring theme, its branches heavy with the weight of her memories. Years passed, and Sophie's life took a different path. She moved to London, her art earning her a modest living. She never married, her heart forever tethered to a love that had been stolen from her. One autumn, she returned to Evermoor to visit her mother's grave. The village had changed, but the lover's oak remained the same. As she stood beneath its canopy, she heard a familiar voice. "I thought I might find you here." Sophie turned, her breath catching. Thomas stood before her, older but unmistakably him. His smile was tentative, as if he feared she might vanish. "Thomas," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I've been looking for you," he said. "Everywhere I went, I carried you with me. I had to come back, to see if." Sophie stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "I never stopped loving you." Under the shadow of the ancient oak, their love rekindled, defying the years and the pain that had kept them apart. The lover's oak, witness to their reunion, stood tall and silent, its branches reaching for the heavens as if in celebration of a love that had endured.